In the Caribbean, off Cartagena, one shipwreck turned into one of the most fought-over mysteries in the world. It sank in battle. It vanished for centuries. And when people started talking about its cargo, the story stopped being just history and became a global treasure hunt. This is the San Jose Galleon. It is usually described as a treasure ship, but that phrase hides the real tension. Was the wreck simply a loaded Spanish galleon that went down in war? Or is the legend now bigger than the ship itself? Because gold, politics, archaeology, and ownership all collided at the same underwater point. The San Jose belonged to the age of treasure fleets and imperial war. Spain was moving wealth across the Atlantic, protected by armed ships and fragile routes that were never truly safe. In 1708, near Cartagena de Indias, the San Jose was caught during the naval action known as Wager's Action. That is the part that matters most for the logic of the case. This was not a fairy tale ship that appeared out of nowhere. It was a real warship in a real conflict, carrying real cargo in an era when empires counted silver, gold, and prestige as power. The sea did not just hide the ship. It preserved the problem. The modern mystery sharpened when Colombia announced in 2015 that it had located the wreck. That discovery changed everything. Now the question was not whether a treasure ship existed in legend. The question was what exactly had been found, who had a claim to it, and how much of the story could be proven without disturbing the site. This is where the San Jose becomes so powerful on video. You can show the ship, the depth, the coordinates, the legal claims, and the cargo rumors all in the same frame. The wreck is not just an object, it is a dispute in the shape of a ship. The story spread because it had every ingredient a treasure legend needs. A famous wreck. A war story. A cargo of gold, silver, and emeralds. And the kind of missing data that keeps people arguing for decades. Once the San Jose was tied to billions in treasure estimates, it stopped being a maritime incident and became a cultural magnet. Newsrooms, treasure hunters, governments, and lawyers all began pulling on the same thread. That is not a weakness in the story. That is the story. The treasure became valuable not only because of what was inside the ship, but because the ship itself became the container for competing versions of history. Long before the 2015 announcement, the wreck had already lived a second life in search claims and lawsuits. Sea Search Armada said it had found the site decades earlier and fought for recognition and compensation. Colombia rejected that framing and treated the wreck as national heritage. That legal fight matters because it shows how quickly an archaeological site becomes an economic and political battlefield when treasure enters the conversation. The deepest mystery is not just where the ship is. It is who gets to define what the ship means. Is it salvage? Is it heritage? Is it a burial place for history? Or is it all three at once, depending on who is speaking? The rational explanation starts with archaeology, not fantasy. At about 600 meters deep, the San Jose is far below the easy reach of traditional recovery. That depth changes everything. You do not treat a site like a pirate chest. You treat it like a time capsule. Recent Colombian work has emphasized robotic inspection, careful documentation, and limited extraction of objects for study and conservation. That is the scientific side of the story. It is slower, less dramatic, and much more important. Because once a wreck is rushed, the historical record is damaged forever. The San Jose looks like a treasure hunter's dream, because it has a famous cargo and an imperial backstory. That combination is practically a myth engine. People hear gold and imagine a chest. They hear emeralds and imagine a vault. They hear shipwreck and imagine a single decisive dive that settles everything. But wrecks are not clean treasure maps. They are broken environments. Cargo disperses. Wood collapses. Metal corrodes. And the deeper the site sits, the more the myth has to do the talking. That is why the San Jose can feel obvious and unknowable at the same time. If the ship is real, what does proof actually mean? Not the estimate. Not the headlines. The proof. A secure archaeological chain. Catalogued objects. Context that survives recovery. And a clear, defensible answer to who owns what. This is where the San Jose gets harder to simplify than most treasure stories. The wreck exists, but the meaning is still contested. The treasure may be there, but the interpretation is the real battleground. That is why legal certainty and historical certainty are not the same thing. The San Jose also matters because Cartagena is not just a backdrop. It is a working port with a long memory. Ships, fortifications, archives, and colonial trade all overlap there. That means the wreck is not isolated. It sits inside a wider historical machine of routes, records, and extraction. The deeper you follow the papers, the less the story feels like a single treasure ship, and the more it feels like the last visible piece of a system that moved wealth across oceans. That is the part that makes the case feel bigger than one wreck. Recent scientific work has focused on identifying and conserving objects rather than stripping the site for loot. That is the right instinct. A cannon, a porcelain cup, coins, timber. Each piece matters less as a prize than as evidence. Objects tell you what was aboard, how the ship was built, what routes it traveled, and how the wreck changed after sinking. That makes every recovered item a small argument against turning the site into a spectacle. The real value is not in emptying the wreck. It is in learning from it without destroying it. Ownership fights sound boring until they decide what gets preserved and what gets sold. In the San Jose case, that difference is everything. If the wreck is treated like merchandise, the story becomes about value. If it is treated like heritage, the story becomes about context, conservation, and accountability. Those are not cosmetic labels. They change the future of the site. And they explain why the San Jose still feels so charged even after the wreck was found. The ship is underwater. The argument is on land. The scarier explanation is that the wreck does not need to be mysterious to be powerful. It may simply be a violent record of empire. A ship loaded with wealth. A battle at sea. A wreck resting at depth for centuries while later generations argue over who inherited the right to name it. That version is less romantic than buried treasure. And more unsettling. Because it means the real story is not hidden gold. It is how wealth, war, and law keep following the ship long after the ship itself has gone still. So what is the San Jose Galleon, really? It is a wreck from 1708. A treasure ship in the broad historical sense. A legal dispute in the modern sense. And a laboratory for deciding whether the past belongs to the market or to memory. That is why the legend survives. Not because the wreck is impossible to understand, because every answer opens another question about who gets to control the story. The gold is what brought attention. The record is what will outlast it. And if the wreck keeps pulling in new arguments, that is because it has become a mirror for every modern fight about history, profit, and memory. If the San Jose Galleon made you rethink what a treasure ship really is, stay with the Mystery Atlas TV. We keep following the wrecks where history, money, and evidence all collide. Subscribe for the next investigation, and tell me whether you think the real treasure is the cargo, the wreck, or the proof itself. Because sometimes the shipwreck is only the beginning of the story, not the end of it. And this one is still writing new chapters.